I'd like to walk everybody through something that I've labeled Love Your Neighbor. We see this commandment displayed in Matthew and in Luke. But starting in Matthew, Jesus at the time he's preaching in the temple courts in Jerusalem, and amongst the people of the time were Pharisees and Sadducees, and they were listening in on Jesus' preaching for anything that was blasphemous to God in order to crucify him. And this is where we see in Matthew where a Pharisee, which was an expert in the 613 written laws and 10 commandments that the Jewish people lived by at the time, tries to trip up Jesus by asking him to identify the greatest commandment in the law. And in Matthew 22:37 through 39, Jesus responds not by choosing one law or the other, but by summing up all 613 laws and 10 commandments. And he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." When Jesus says to love your neighbor, he's emphasizing the importance of selfless, unconditional love for others, regardless of who they are. The concept of neighbor isn't limited to the people who live next door. This includes everybody. It's that childhood bully that you haven't been able to forgive after all these years. It's that coworker that always gossips about you and looks you in the face and says, "Good morning, how are you doing?" It's that ex that you haven't been able to get over, that you've blocked and you're thinking that you're ready to move on, but you truly haven't let go of anything yet. It's the person that cut you off this morning on your way to work and you screamed unholy things back at them. Trust me, we're not all self-righteous. But more than anything, it's the person that's begging in the streets for help, for need, for anything, and the fact that you're too self-righteous to give to them. All of these people are neighbors, and this is especially clear in the Gospel of Luke in the parable of the Good Samaritan. In Luke 10:25 through 37, "And behold, a lawyer stood up to him to put him to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' And he said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live.' But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' And Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell amongst robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to that place, saw him and passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him, and he bound up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he sat him on his own animal, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever